30 years of my life studying Eastern Kentucky history, and especially the history of the Bowling family that settled in this section of Perry County and Breathitt County and all of that area. Bowlingtown itself doesn't exist anymore. It's now underwater. What exists at Bowlingtown is the memories that lives on in generations of people that lived here. And in a few generations, those won't even exist, as people who actually lived in Bowlingtown pass away, and all they leave us are pictures and stories. Most of these folks are not going to be able to get into a boat and go up the river to where they lived, or where they grew up, or where grandfather lived, or where the old barn stood. So they have to stand on the balcony of Bowlingtown and think about what was.
I wish you could see this. I wish you could have seen this. This was awesome. And that beautiful green sandy bottom river that curls around the mountains and between the mountains. It was just so awesome, so clean.
Bowlingtown grew around that center of a family, that core of family togetherness. And it grew in a community that had all of the resources that they needed. But that feeling of being a bowling, that feeling of being part of a community that no longer exists, it is very strong, and it keeps people coming back year after year after year to revisit what was, to remember what could, and think about what could have been in this community.
They seem more like family to us than actually visitors. They have 3 separate family reunions that come every year with us.
It's part of my heritage and my life, so it means a lot to me.
Yeah, Bowlingtown was a fine place to grow up in. We had a lot of fun growing up and had big dances.
I think that's why we all still come back, because this is our roots, and we can come back here and reminisce, and Bowlingtown will always be in our hearts.
People come back to Buckhorn State Park today, and they look around and they can point to where the schoolhouse was. They can talk about where the ball field was. But there's really nothing left standing that says this is Bowlingtown, other than the lodge. The lodge is not an original structure, but it's built at a place where there are memories. So the lodge is sort of the central point, the focal point of the interest in Bowlingtown. They have several exhibits, photographs, things in the lodge that will help you know a little bit about Bowlingtown. But really the lodge is a symbol of what was.
We have found that they have very strong family ties to the area, and that they really have a lot of heart and desire to preserve their family memories and their customs.
I built replicas of all the people's homes that was run out of here on account of the flood control dam.
And when you look at the little replicas that Ance McIntosh has made, he showed me where my great aunt lived, where my grandfather's sisters lived, and showed me a replica of the barn they had. If you haven't been in that little room, you need to see it, because that barn is just beautiful. I mean, it's a huge barn, and that had to be flooded. That had to be just deteriorated. It's sad.
The whole flooding of the town, that kind of sparks my attention. It's interesting to learn about. I mean, I want to know why, and I want to know what happened.
Well, basically it was authorized by Congress. So after a lot of the flooding in the 1927s and the 1930s and the 40s, the Corps of Engineers was assigned to do flood control. The property was taken. They were paid for the property, fair market value typically. And what they do and what they look at is, the benefits of how much, what are the benefits to cost ratios, and they try to make as least impact as possible on people's lives.
They understood the importance of the flood control project. They understood the devastation that the floods of 57 and 37 and 27 had brought to the people of the mountains. But yet there's still that feeling of having to leave home, having to pack up, having to abandon everything you'd worked for years and years. Bowlingtown was still home to us. Bowlingtown was still part of us. And of course, when they flooded the area and the families moved and left, it was like an entire branch of the family was gone.
Well, that's like they come in here surveying for the lake. We didn't know what they were surveying for. They surveyed for years and years. And then we found out they ain't built a dam, a flood control. And it broke the people's heart to hear news like that, because this has been home to them all their lives.
I'll remember very distinctly the day that the Army Corps of Engineers walked into my dad's store. He had the local grocery store and post office, and they were here to negotiate with him to buy his property if they were going to put a flood control dam in here. And that was the first time that we ever had any news that they was going to build a dam here. And the thing I think that was unique is, of course, I guess back then nobody thought about it. When they came in here to buy his land, he had worked his whole life to build a business. He had a grocery store, farms, and they never offered him anything for the business. They just offered him, they bought the real estate underneath his feet and told him that we had to leave.
And I kept hearing about how they came in, how they took it, and how they paid them nothing for it, how they couldn't get the money to buy another place, how it took 2 years for some of them to even get their money, and how grieved they were, and each one kind of sort of went their separate way. They didn't organize and work together.
But for the people that lived here, the lake still represents the loss, the disappointment, the fact that all that they had and all that they had planned were flooded away. It's gone. For me to look at the lake, I see both sides. I see both sides. It is a benefit, it is a help in flood issues, but it also represents all that happened in the 50s and 60s as these floodwaters started to rise. One of the more interesting stories about the Bowlingtown experience is the fact that there was so much argument, so much disruption because of the moving of the graves. Yes, taking the homes, taking the barns and the homesteads and all of that was very difficult, but moving those graves really was probably the most difficult aspect of the entire relocation, and probably caused more pain and suffering than anything else.
They told my dad that they were going to move the graves. They had to have, that they were afraid water would get up there. Well, water has never been there. That was really a sad thing for me to see the graves move when they have never used this property except for a golf course and a picnic shelter.
All they was going to do is put a picnic shelter over there, so we just felt like that they could have put the picnic shelter anywhere.
There was 7 generations of people buried there.
My grandfather was moved, my grandmother.
And they said, we will contact you a week before that we move your people's graves. Well, that went fine. They never contacted my dad in any way. They were moved, and they never even told him they moved them. He just happened to come up here, and they had been moved to the cemetery at Buckhorn.
And it just, to put a putt-putt golf course where 265 people were buried, somebody wasn't thinking. And for the people to have to stand there and watch them take up 7 generations of their families, just think how you would feel. I think they were so hurt they couldn't fight.
It's made hardships on the people, having to get to the cemeteries.
In 1951, I had to leave the old place and search for work. I vowed to return someday and build a home, but the lake put a stop to that. I would come back to Bowlingtown every chance I got. Before the lake, I would drive up the old gravel road where many old dusty miles I've walked. After the lake, I would drive through the parking lot looking for someone I knew and found none. I stopped and looked out over the lake. It was a beautiful lake, nestled between these beautiful hills, which was home to me.
Thank you, Henry.
And they took our ancestors and dug them up, and put them on a big old steep mountain and close to Buckhorn out there. And a lot of people didn't like that.
I can't climb these mountains now. I went to my wife's grave and they had to help me. They had to help me to get up to the graveyard. It's a steep hill to go. It's across the lake over there. And it's a steep hill. I walked up there though, with their help.
Many times some people forget about, the Corps of Engineers, or don't think about the Corps of Engineers as being part of the community. And so we are a part of the community. And they think of us as part of the community, which sometimes you don't get in all the places, but here at Buckhorn we have to. Small, rural towns, but yet, even though we're the federal government, we're still a neighbor to them, and we're still friends to them, and we know each other, and they know us, and they know that they can come and ask us for some help if we need to. And I think that's important. We are part of the community, and we think of ourselves as part of the community, and hopefully we're just not the big government agency. Even though the lake was here and it did inundate some homes in the town of Bowlingtown, it's provided other things also, growth and some economy and stimulation there. We provide a benefit, an economic benefit to the local area.